Welcome to Mexico. It is a great pleasure to have all of you present here in this first week of the Explorers of the National Geographic Exploration, and all the talent that is here present. This is a tremendous honor to have all of you here. Muchísimas gracias a todos los miembros del Consejo de National Geographic Society. It is a pleasure to have you in Mexico. As a Mexican, I feel very, very proud that Mexico was chosen as the first country to be able to hold the symposium. And then with all the activities that we have prepared for the entire week, that will be great. And I want to thank the National Geographic Society for having trusted us to hold this event here in Mexico. It is important to have all the support and collaboration of such an important society that has a long history, particularly in this world that needs this kind of collaboration. We need more societies like yours. So welcome to Mexico. I hope you love the city. There's a lot to do. I think this is a totally National Geographic city. I also want to thank our entire team of National Geographic partners, all the people from Mexico and Washington who are here making this possible, and the NGO team here in Mexico and Fox Networks Group and from Latin America, all those that are here present making this possible. Today, we're going to learn about some of the work that you as the explorers have been doing. We're very, very excited. It's the first time that we put all this together. I saw you rehearsing a while ago. Don't get nervous. We are the ones who are nervous. We want to understand you, to take care of you. You're geniuses. Nobody knows more than you about what you're going to present, and that's incredible because for us, that is a chance to learn about what you're discovering, what you're researching, and transmit it to all people globally, not only the 60 million in Latin America, but all those in the magazines that interact with the society, that see our station in cable TV or pay TV. And for those of us who are on the side of transmission and those who are in the editorial side or publishing side of National Geographic, we want to learn from you face to face. We want to see that enthusiasm, that passion of why you're doing what you're doing. That is what helps us to communicate and transmit to people what you are actually doing. So thank you very much. Please enjoy Mexico City and enjoy the show.
On a cold winter night in Washington, D.C., National Geographic's 33 founders come together, bound by a belief that science and a heightened understanding of our world has the power to change it for the better. Together, they forge a new society, and it isn't long before explorers from far and wide join in. To share our discoveries, we'd create what would become one of the most recognizable publications in the world, the National Geographic magazine. The very first issue is sent to just 200 members, and from there, our society takes off. In the 1950s and 60s, we championed Lewis and Mary Leakey's search for humanity's origins, and support Jane Goodall's work in Gombe National Park to study wild chimpanzees by living among them.
The fascinating thing is that so many of the gestures used by the chimps are the same as ours.
Soon, our explorers are reaching all corners of the globe and beyond. Astronaut John Glenn carries our geographic flag into space in 1962. And a year later, Barry Bishop plants one on Everest, when he and a team become the first Americans to reach the summit. As we celebrate our first century in 1988, we commence our second by striving to encourage a better stewardship of the planet.
Can we learn enough, fast enough, to apply what we know, to turn things in a positive direction?
As our explorers lead by example, we begin arming new generations with knowledge and an appreciation for our planet through educational outreach around the world. With the world in a constant state of change, we make it our responsibility to explore and understand that change and share new findings as widely as possible. By 1995, our magazine goes international. Within a year, our first website is created. Soon after, National Geographic channels launch internationally and in the U.S. Within a decade, we're reaching hundreds of millions of people across the globe and have now sponsored more than 13,000 scientific research, conservation, and exploration projects. It seems the vision of our 33 founders has been more than realized. But that's no reason to rest. Being satisfied has never been part of our DNA. In 2015, we created National Geographic Partners. Now our platform is unrivaled. And it's supporting our global nonprofit team as we award more grants, create more programs, launch initiatives, engage classrooms, and develop the next generation of changemakers at a time when the work of National Geographic has never been more important. But where do we go from here? Had our founders asked this question way back in 1888, the answer would have been the same as it is today.
Señoras y señores, el presidente y director general de National Geographic Society, Gary Nell.
Muchísimas gracias, Carlos, and everyone. Buenos días a todos. Es un absoluto privilegio estar con todos ustedes. Por lo tanto, comenzamos nuestro primer festival de exploradores en la Ciudad de México. Bienvenidos. And now, excuse me for my poor Spanish, which will now turn magically into English. I know that many of you have traveled hundreds of miles, thousands of miles from Argentina and Chile, all up here to Mexico, to be here today. And we are celebrating because we have the power to change the world. We're fortunate today to have all of you explorers, our colleagues from the Fox Networks group, who do such a great job in promoting the National Geographic mission across Latin America. Our wonderful chairman, Gene Case, and her husband, Steve Case, welcome. On behalf of my wife, Kim Larson, who spent a lot of time in Mexico herself and has traveled the region, we welcome you. I'd also like to do a shout out to our international group, Gael Almeida, who's here in Mexico City. She's running for mayor of Mexico City. And Dave Schacht, who runs our international programs. My colleague Alex Mohn, who oversees our Explorer programs. Welcome. And, of course, our wonderful Chief Operating Officer, Mike Ulica. Mike, thank you for being here. And finally, many thanks to our friends at Rolex for their support and for helping make this entire week possible. We couldn't have done it without their help. Together, Rolex has worked since 1954 to create a special relationship about promoting a perpetual planet. And we're going to step up over the next several years to work together to fund more explorers, more expeditions, more research, and find new innovators to indeed change the world. We're helping support established and emerging explorers, And together, we will enable more scientific expeditions to promote research and bold innovations that will yield new exploration technologies, which, of course, are all aimed at protecting our planet. And then together, we'll share their stories through the big voice of National Geographic for the benefit of future generations. So together with Rolex and all of our partners, we're empowering the world's most groundbreaking individuals, from scientists and adventurers to conservationists and technologists to storytellers and educators. Collectively, we're all explorers because you are the beating heart of National Geographic, the men and women who give so much to advance science, explore and explain our world and all of its mysteries, and protect and save our planet's natural resources, sharing amazing stories with audiences all over the globe. We are the power to change the world. It's especially exciting to be here right now. Having recently reached a major milestone, National Geographic Society just celebrated its 130th birthday. I was not there at the beginning, but we have built 13 decades of exploration, discovery, and impact. And it was these gentlemen, 33 of them, and they were gentlemen at the time, who were Washington, D.C.'s top scientific and intellectual leaders. Many of them were their millennials of their time, who joined forces to increase and diffuse geographic knowledge. They were amazing people. They were explorers. They were going on rafts. They were using the equivalent of LiDAR technology of 1888. And from our earliest days, they recognized the importance to bring to audiences the vibrant and diverse cultures of the world and of geography of Latin America. Because throughout our history, the society's been investing in Latin America. We funded pioneer archaeologist Dr. Eusebio Dávalos Hurtado as he researched and explored a sacred cenote known as the Well of Sacrifice in Chichen Itza in Mexico's Yucatan. The research of zoologist Dr. Fred Urquhart, who along with a team discovered the wintering grounds of monarch butterflies in the mountains of Mexico. And biologist Erica Cuellar. Erica, who you're here today, there she is. Wearing her non-office uniform, who is here enlisting local villagers and indigenous people to navigate and better understand and conserve South America's Gran Chaco, one of the planet's largest unknown wildernesses, which spread across parts of Bolivia, Argentina, Paraguay, and Brazil. And this year alone, we're going to continue our investment in Latin America and investing in you, the future of science and storytelling and education, by committing more than $3 million to grants, training, and capacity building in Latin America. Here today is an incredible group of Latin American explorers who are emblematic of the types of change makers that we are supporting. And as part of our increased commitment to this region, National Geographic is launching the first international pilot of our educator certification program, which is a free professional development program for K through 12 teachers who are committed to empowering their students to become the next generation of scientists, explorers, technologists, engaged citizens, and ultimately responsible stewards of the planet. And that's going on right here in Mexico. We're going to be working in tandem with local organizations who will serve as our partners and advisors. This is the first time that we've expanded our education work internationally, and I can't think of a better place to start than in Mexico. There'll be more on this in coming weeks ahead. Our work educating and informing our world is more important and more urgent than ever. For the challenges facing our planet have grown significantly, from climate change and overconsumption of our natural resources to demographic challenges causing geopolitical tensions, to name a few. But National Geographic, I would argue, is incredibly well positioned to address these global challenges. You know, just a couple of years ago, The Society, under the leadership of Chairman Case and her colleagues, and I see Dr. Angel Cabrera, welcome Angel, from our board as well. We worked together to build a new model for National Geographic to ensure that we could continue our mission to fund explorers and grantees and tell their stories around the world. We created this very unique value proposition by combining the resources of television, which our colleagues at 21st Century Fox had done brilliantly with us, as well as print, books and magazines, and digital storytelling. We put this all together to create a very powerful megaphone which can now reach throughout Latin America and indeed around the world. And at the same time, we were able to really double down and create an endowment which has now reached over $1.2 billion to be able to strengthen and secure grant making and operating programs and education for the future. It allows us to double down on bold people and transformative ideas while enhancing our focus along these three lenses: how we define human and physical geography, our changing planet, things like climate change, wildlife in wild places to reverse some of the threats that are going on, human-created and otherwise. And of course, the human journey, which goes all the way back to human origins, to the discoveries in the cenotes here in Mexico, of the first origins of North Americans, and all the way up, perhaps, to Elon Musk and his colleagues colonizing Mars. So last year, the Society funded more than 600 grants, totaling over $16 million. And we expanded these types of grants and fellowships for the first time to, yes, fund scientists and explorers, but now also to fund photographers, environmental and science journalists, to fund technologists, to fund cartographers and mappers, and yes, to fund teachers who are inspiring kids in the classroom to make a real difference. For we collectively have the power to change the world. So by any measure now, I think we've created a media and mission powerhouse called National Geographic, which reaches millions of people, over 700 million people around the world each month on multiple platforms, including 86 million followers on our Instagram account. We're catching up to Cristiano Ronaldo shortly. I think we'll beat him after they lose out in the UEFA Champions Cup. At National Geographic, we have the people, the tenacity, and the organization to push forward, to advance the world's science and research, to tell stories that build awareness and spur action, to educate and inspire change. So today's symposium is not only about great conversations and inspiring presentations. I'd like to remind our explorers here and everyone here in attendance, from partners and from elsewhere, that this is really about convening. We brought you together for a purpose today. It's kind of like Mission Impossible. We'd like you to cross-pollinate and to brainstorm, to lay the groundwork for future collaborations by meeting people you wouldn't otherwise normally meet in your everyday course of work. Because together, these challenges can actually be achieved. They can be conquered. We can work together because we have seen this time and time again. We have one example in the room today, Guillermo de Anda. Guillermo, would you raise your hand? Six years ago, he was an emerging explorer. You see what happens in 6 years? He lost all of his hair. He got a grant to study Mayan ruins in the underwater caves in the Yucatan. And at this symposium, he met a fellow for National Geographic named Corey Jaskalski. He's an amazing guy who creates these technologies using robotic camera systems which help scientists and filmmakers. And they began a collaboration that developed into an incredibly ambitious multi-year effort. What started as a project to merely digitally scan artifacts and remains in the Holtun cenote without disturbing them, turned into a large-scale effort to explore and document Mayan sites like El Castillo Pyramid in the Yucatan. Along with 2 National Geographic engineers, the team employed ground-penetrating radar to locate hidden passageways, ultimately using the data to produce a 3D supermap of the entire site, both above and below ground, in order to better understand and preserve it virtually. And this made a huge breakthrough in the understanding of our true roots of our human journey in North America. And it all started at a symposium just like this one. This is just one of the many powerful examples of what can happen when we bring all of you together. So I hope each of you will make the most out of this remarkable gathering today to get to know your colleagues, share your ideas and experience and what you can learn from each other. And then keep pushing, keep striving to make new discoveries, to drive much needed change. Thank you for all you do each and every day and will continue to do, because collectively we have the power to change the world. Now it's my pleasure to invite to the stage our Chief Marketing and Engagement Officer, Emma Carrasco. Emma joined us 2 years ago and has already made a significant contribution to our efforts to elevate awareness of the Society's overarching mission and profound impact among key constituencies all over the world. Please join me in welcoming Emma Carrasco.
Bienvenida a Emma Carrasco. Muchísimas gracias, Gary. Muy buenos días. Good morning. You all look fantastic. Today is a very, very special day for us in National Geographic. On behalf of all my colleagues and the teams of scientists, explorers, people in education, photography, journalism, marketing, thanks to you all. Today represents a very significant step in achieving this goal of expanding and diversifying our community of explorers. And we're very, very excited to be here with you. As Gary said, the National Geographic Society, we have a very ambitious vision. What is it? Well, to see a planet that is balanced, a world in which science, exploration, education, and stories and histories all come together, enabling us to have a better understanding of ourselves, of our planet, its diversity, and the cultures throughout the world. So with that better understanding, we can actually reach solutions that will take us to a more sustainable future. Never before in our history have we been at such a critical time. And this is why the work, the tasks of our explorers and the work that all of us in National Geographic do is so important. We are committed to empower and involve our explorers throughout the entire world so that their work truly reflects the changes we want to achieve and that we need to see in our planet. And even though we are celebrating exploration every single day, traditionally, as Gary said, every year we come together in Washington, D.C., our headquarters, for the Explorers Festival. And it's a very inspiring event because of the ideas we listen to, the innovations, the achievements of our scientists, conservationists, explorers, educators, and storytellers. I know that many of you have been to those meetings. And 2 years ago, it was magical. We took the Explorers Festival to London. It was sensational. And today we are here with you, friends, colleagues in Mexico City. So yes, we are taking the Explorers Festival throughout the world. Today we have brought together an incredible repertoire of explorers from different parts of Latin America. All of them are pioneers, motivated by an infinite curiosity and their commitment to make the world a better one. Today, we will have the privilege to learn about the work of nearly 30 Latin American explorers. They are divided into 3 segments that correspond to our different areas of interest. Each explorer will have 3 minutes, and only 3 minutes, to share their story, what impassions them, their discoveries, their determination, and truly make a difference. You are truly going to learn about the essence of National Geographic today. So, if we are ready, let us get the show on the road.
From a distance, it always seems impossible. But impossible is just a place we haven't been to yet. Impossible is what beckons us to go further, to explore. It calls us from the wild, lures us into the unknown, asks us to dig deeper, to look at things from new perspectives, and sometimes forces us to change the way we see. The impossible appears in the darkest hours, taunts us with answers in the most unlikely places, hides solutions where there once were none. It can drive us to the brink, but it's what beats in the heart of every explorer. Because the further we go into the impossible, the closer we are to making it possible.
The impossible becomes possible. So, the first group of explorers for today is making extraordinary work in order to preserve a wide array of species. So it's wildlife and wild places and wild beings. So we have explorer number 1, Rosamira Guillén. She is from Colombia. She is an architect and is executive director of Fundación Proyecto Titi. Had you heard about the cotton-top tamarins? I had never done that. And until I joined the city zoo, and then I learned that this small primate lives only in a small portion of Colombia. It was amazing, and I was so proud. I felt so happy, but at the same time, I was scared, because I also learned that it was endangered from the wildlife, because the forest where it lives is disappearing, and because they are taking as pets. They are being taken as pets. And as we went in the Colombian landscape looking for these tamarins, we saw hectares and hectares that had been lost to cattle raising, agriculture, and leaving the forest pretty much at 2% of its original size, and with islands of isolated forests. And that is very hard for a small primate that never leaves the trees. And this situation of the tamarins and the Colombian proud led me to a change in my career. I started working to the tamarin preservation, and we had to start by saving the forest, and we started doing that. We are creating corridors interconnecting these isolated forests and protecting the forests that are still left in Colombia. And we are not doing this alone. We are working with peasants, with growers, with art craft artists who are working with these beautiful stuffed animals, with schools, with the authority as well. Because the forest that is the home of the tamarin benefits us as well, and that is exactly what we want to learn about. So the agreement is we help to move the rural communities as well, but they also help us protect the forest and the tamarins. We also devote a lot of time to educate the new Colombian generation so that they can feel the tamarins, so that they can dance and they can dress as tamarins, and so that they can feel excited talking about these small animals and feel this pride. So please follow us and learn more about our story and about our effort. And you can help us find the necessary support that we need in order to preserve the cotton top tamarind for the future. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Rosa Mira. Now we are ready for Daniela Cafaji. Daniela is Mexican biologist with the Laboratory of Ecology and Conservation of Terrestrial Vertebrates of the National Autonomous University. I give you Daniela Cafaji. Well, good morning. What is the first thing you think when you hear bat? Bat. You think about many things. However, these animals today don't convey a very positive image. Therefore, many people ask us at the lab how to get rid of these animals at their homes. And this also happened with the administrators of an archaeological site, and that is how the project started. I had a wonderful experience to work in one of the most important archaeological sites in Yucatan, namely Chichen Itza, one of the wonders of the world. So what I do is I go into all these structures and look for the spaces where they feed, where they rest, and in the night I can capture flying animals. Therefore, not only to learn where they sleep and how they sleep, but also how they are using the space. We have been working in this project for 2 seasons, and we have captured around 2,000 bats. But not only that, but we have been able to learn that in these 4 sites, we have more than 50% of the bat diversity of the Yucatan Peninsula. And it also took us by surprise to learn that it's not only bats living there, but we also found porcupines, coatis, serpents, rattlesnakes, mice, lizards, and a number of animals. And this has allowed us to learn that these sites have an astonishing potential not to preserve culture and archaeology, but also our wildlife diversity. That is why we want to work with a dissemination and information program with archaeologists and contribute to Mi Arte project. I want to provide the artwork for guides for these sites. I want to invite you the next time you visit an archaeological site in Mexico or elsewhere, please open your eyes as an explorer, because perhaps you can learn about the inhabitants of these of these very old sites, archaeological sites. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Daniela. Now, I'll make an appointment. Now, we have Leonardo Lana, an explorer. He is from Brazil. He is a biologist and founder of the Mantis Project. La primera vez que vi a la mantis religiosa fue en la casa de mis padres y vi a este enorme insecto. Yo pensé que me iba a atacar, la verdad me dio mucho miedo, entonces tomé una fotografía como a 2 metros, luego lo guardé en un frasco y lo llevé a mi clase en la universidad. Pero cuando yo venía de regreso a Río, me sentí culpable porque la mantis me veía y quería volver a casa. Yo estaba seguro, era como un ser humano y empecé a enamorarme de este animal. Luego aprendí muchísimo, aprendí que son absolutamente inofensivas, aprendí también que su mundo es maravilloso. Y la verdad es que fue un mundo increíble que se abrió ante mis ojos, que estaba ahí en mi casa. Así pues, creé el proyecto Mantis, no solo para la investigación, sino para reconectar a la gente con la mantis, como me sucedió a mí. Desde entonces hemos trabajado en la selva tropical que está ahorita en peligro. Es la selva tropical del Atlántico y ahorita hemos estado trabajando con plantas, con animales diversos y por supuesto hemos encontrado muchas mantis, muchas especies, muchas de ellas raras y que nos han por supuesto intrigado muchísimo. Nuestro trabajo en este mundo pequeño nos ha inspirado muchísimo. ¿Quién?
And I know most of you must be also afraid of insects. And I can assure you, if you spend a few minutes with me and a praying mantis, you would love them. I must warn you, you would probably want to have one as a pet. So be careful, really. They are amazing. Projeto Mantis is growing. We are a team of 4 now, 2 fellow explorers, and a designer we have, Lucas, also the love of my life. We are able to bring art to science, collaborating with local artists. We've put design and communication as one of the main pillars of our science project. And we also, through social media and photograph, have been sharing all the wonders we find in Brazil. So, I invite you to know this word, this tiny word that is so close to us. I invite you to know these little animals that help me understand better our world. I was just listening now to this song made by Bjork, and she says, all is full of love. You just have to look around you. And we don't have just to look around us, but we also have to look closer. We have to look for the tiny world. The insects are dying, and we have the power to help them. We have the power to choose if they die or if they live. And I choose life. I hope that we explorers can touch your heart and make you feel the same passion we have for nature. Thank you.
Gracias. Okay, we are ready now. We are now traveling to Argentina with Emiliano Donagli from the National University of La Plata, and he comes from the Argentine Research Council. Well, good morning, and thank you, Leandro, for your wonderful presentation. I want to invite you early in the morning, just at any time in Argentina, and as we walk, perhaps we will see a group of vicunas like the one we are seeing on screen, and they are ready to approach the grassland. But before doing that, you'll see them very straight, their heads up, and their ears attentive, and very open eyes. These vicunas are not looking for the worst place to to grass. No, they are looking for indications of the only animal that can be their attacker. 10 meters away from their vicunas in the grassland, a puma is ready to strike. Today, it's going to be a bad day for the vicunas. They will not detect the presence of danger. They will not detect danger. And when they go into the grassland, the puma, the cougar, will feed on the vicuna, and the remains of the vicuna will be eaten by other animals, namely the Andean condor. These relationships among animals that are key to preserve the natural richness of our planet can be seen in South America. However, due to the impact of humans, can only be seen here and there. We work with research, with education and activism in order to achieve four more main objectives: identification, understanding, preserve, and restore the environmental relationships across species. We hope that with the dissemination and with our hard work, this will be achieved. Therefore, I invite you to envision a different future, a future where early in the morning, just about every day, your grandsons, your great grandsons can walk across South America and can see the wonders of nature that only a few today have been able to see. So be it, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for your presence this morning. Well, thank you, Emiliano. Now, we have Mexico's Development Center in Oaxaca. We have Gustavo Hinojosa from the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California and the National Council for Science and Technology. I'm going to share with you one of the greatest challenges that we have for the preservation of biological diversity, and that is how can we implement in an ever-changing world, in the world where we live, in a change where we are not connected. Even though technology has allowed us to be in touch across the world, it has also isolated us from those closer to us. We have learned to see the world through a screen, and we have forgotten the excitement of being part of this world. When we talk about the sea, this lack of connection is even greater because cities are not closer to the coast, and maritime animals are only there for a few seconds. An exception to these are the sea turtles that go to the coasts of Oaxaca. They share with us wonderful spectacle every single year. Last year, there were 1 million nests at Morayuta beach, that is one of the most important beaches for the turtle worldwide. And this is the result of 3 or 4 decades of preservation that have allowed us to see the recovery of the endangered population pretty much at the rim of extinction. However, the challenges faced by these turtles have changed, and my job is to understand the changes in order to contribute. With my team, we have seen that garbage, particularly plastics, have become one of the threats, not only to turtles but to other organisms, because they cannot tell the difference between these materials and they can eat. Here we see a turtle that has been tangled with plastic, and if we hadn't been there, it would have died. So our job as explorers is to be the eyes of the rest of the world and be able to interconnect new generations and adults with nature by means of our work. And we should find ways so that they can understand that throwing garbage in the larger cities has repercussions in distant places, because this garbage goes through the rivers all the way to the coasts, therefore giving rise to problems like the ones we are trying to cope with. In order to disseminate our work, we expect to bring about small changes in people, and therefore some these changes, these efforts in order to achieve global transformation. We are part of the problem, therefore we need to be part of the solution as well. And with the involvement of all of us, we will be able to achieve the preservation of diversity for the generations to come. Thank you very much. Well, now we have our next explorer, Begoña Iñárritu. She is a biologist from the National Autonomous University, and she works at the National National Protected Areas Commission in Mexico. So Begoña is with us this morning. Take a look at this photograph. Perhaps you can tell that these are bats. The context of this photograph is, of course, a cave. The environment is a cave. They are there. This is completely dark. The tequila bat has its offsprings in the caves, and they feed on the nectars of the desert. They go back to the cave, and then they go elsewhere. I asked myself, how can they find their offsprings? If we have a noisy environment, dark environment, I mean, they all want to, all these offsprings want to feed. And so I decided to put a night sight or night vision camera in order to see what happens. And here you can see what happens. You can see that there's a lot of activity. They are all communicating. They want to be together, mothers and offsprings. They want to reunite. And one of the most astonishing things that I observed is that babies could tell who their mother was. And how could they do that if they are only 2 weeks off? How is it possible that they can recognize the voice or any other feature of their moms? And you might say, why is this useful for? Well, I cannot give you an answer. This type of studies that have to do with animal behavior are key to biological sciences. Without these, Darwin wouldn't have reached the conclusions he reached, and we wouldn't have learned about the behavior of the vaquita marina. But we can use this in order to learn, to preserve, to avoid extinction, to learn the relationship between mothers and offsprings in order to understand their sensitivity and what should be preserved in order to achieve the perpetuation of species. Natural history is not well appreciated today because applied technology moves very fast. However, National Geographic is one of the few organizations contributing to this type of projects so that we can feel this surprise and so that we can explore evolution that has taken so long, and so that we can find the sources of inspiration to lead science, to try to answer questions, to lead to this exploration. To summarize, I would like to put this in front of you. Do you think that bats can follow the stars as orientation in the night, well, that is food for thought for all of you. Well, thank you. Now we have Pietro Polo from Brazil. He is from the Federal University.
So let's talk about sex. My project focuses on mate choice, which is when individuals choose their mates based on characteristics of the opposite sex. Now, we humans do that, right? We think some people are more attractive than other people. And some animals do that too. In peacocks, for example, the males have this large and colorful tail that attracts females. Now, Darwin was the first person to actually study mate choice. He and many other scientists after him thought that females should be choosy, while males shouldn't be selective at all. They actually should hump on every female they can find. But does that apply to all animal kingdom? Because most of our evidence on mate choice comes from large animals that are easy for us to see, such as birds and mammals. But what about invertebrates? They're still very underexplored, and that actually compose a great part of our biodiversity. And what about our cultural view of sex? Because the opinions of Darwin and other scientists after him actually about how men and women should behave sexually in their society probably affected their view on their sexual roles, on sexual roles in nature. So I started to wonder, the reason that we think that males aren't choosy in nature is because they really aren't, or is that's just a product of our human biases and prejudice? So I started to investigate male mate choice in the golden orb web spider. In this species, males probably mate with only few females because they actually have little sperm. Now, females actually vary greatly in size, and female size represents the amount of eggs that they can lay. Meaning that I thought that males would prefer large females because they will give them more offspring compared to small females. But there's another layer of complexity in the system that males actually fight for access to females. And then large males are better fighters than small males. So I also thought that the male size should affect male chooseness, in the sense that a small male can't really fight for these really good girls, so they shouldn't be choosy. But large males that can should be actually preferring these large females that will give them more offspring. So I'm still developing this project, but I hope regardless of my findings, I can actually contribute to our knowledge on mate choice and science without more prejudice and biases, and I hope I can inspire you to do the same. Thank you.
Now we go on to Panama, our next explorer. Now we go on to Panama. Our next explorer is Ricardo Moreno, a biologist, founder of the organization Yaguara, Panama. We're going to talk a little bit about my history with the jaguar. It all began when I was a child. I was very inspired by domestic cats, but my brother always said, there is a very big cat in Panama. It is the jaguar. And it is incredible to be able to know that the jaguar has been with us for 15,000 to 20,000 years. It's a species that we believe, if we're protecting the jaguar, we're actually protecting all the species that are under the jaguar. But what happened? The jaguar is becoming a phantom, a ghost. Why? Why is that? Well, in my country, 40 to 50 are assassinated every year, and that's what we're trying to produce, ecological information that is important, using these camera traps. All these dots that you see, these are places where, together with other people and the Ministry of the Environment, we have placed these camera traps to truly learn what is happening with the jaguar. And also we have GPS collars not only on jaguars, in other species too, to understand the relationship that exists and to produce maps like this one. These are real current maps that allow us to learn what is truly happening with the jaguar in our country. The blue color refers to all the areas that have conflict in our country. Those in red, though there are many here dressed in red and you all look very nice, but the red here means that the population of jaguars is it's near extinction. Their situation is really, really quite terrible. And this is why we are working jointly with those who have the last word. We love conservation. We love protection. We love to see National Geographic documentaries. That's how I started, and many of you did too. But those that have the last word are the people that coexist with them and are truly out with them in the field. Because yes, we're all here today, but maybe there is someone out there that has trouble or a conflict with one of these animals, and this is why we have an agreement with the Ministry of the Environment in Panama to try to improve the situation not only of the jaguar but the people that live near them. These children that you see here are immortalizing the print of the jaguar in a community called Quebradancha. They have decided to preserve the jaguar. The jaguar leaves its prints, and these provides money to the community because they have all come together to produce and disseminate information. But we go crazy communicating all this, transmitting all this. Why not use the social networks? There's radio, there's TV, there's everything. It's important to communicate because if we don't do so, we're not going to let more people learn about it. We want to follow his footprints. So let us continue to look at the jaguar in these beautiful, beautiful pictures. Thank you, Ricardo. Now we go on with Diego Peralta. He is from Argentina. He's a biologist from the University of Favaloro in Argentina. Thank you. Since I was a child, I was extremely curious. I was always trying to learn about things. This led me to study biology, but at the end of the studies, I had more questions than I had at the beginning. So I decided to go on a PhD. I'm on the third year, and there I learned about a fabulous tool, a tool that allows me to generate a lot of information and to do so very quickly. I work with the Navy. Oh no, I'm sorry, with these marine animals. And so I'm traveling throughout the coast, all the way down to Patagonia. So to reach this animal, I need technology, and this is the technology that we developed. We decided to modify this paint rod. We put glue on it, and the sea lions, we are taking away their hair because their hair is excellent material to be able to study them. So once we come back from our excursions and I have to sit at the lab and begin our real work, once everything is ready, we try to get all the information together and try to ask some questions. Many of them I can answer with genetics. Sometimes I can see that the colony that you see up there is able to continue to exist in the future. That's a question that I pose to myself. Or do we have to do something to act in order to preserve it? And then genetics also taught us that that big male sea lion that looks so certain about the females that surround him and he is controlling them, he is not the father of all the offspring that are there. No, we found that there's a lot of infidelity. All those young at the back are young, and they also have a chance to reproduce. So I found loads of these that I was looking for since I was young, and I found some answers, but that's just the beginning. I think genetics is the future. I am convinced that in the coming years, we're going to be able to resolve problems that today take us very long to resolve. Imagine there's a new disease, and thanks to this tool, we can now understand it very quickly and prevent it from expanding. Or maybe we have something that is being cultivated, but then drought sets in, and the conditions change. So try to imagine we create a bacteria that produces oxygen. If we take it to Mars and we create an atmosphere, we would be able to create an atmosphere where we can live. But this is what genetics gives us. It has these tools. So, as I told you, since I was very young, I would love to be a part of those discoveries. Fabulous. Now we continue with Leonora Torres, the explorer Leonora Torres. She's Mexican, a biologist from the Biology Institute at National Autonomous University of Mexico. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm going to tell you about a project in which I wanted to study ocelots, the biggest cat after the puma and the jaguar. I wanted to know why and where they move. But the question is not so trivial because at the study place where I was, it is in the Pacific coast in the state of Jalisco. It is a dry jungle characterized by very specific marked seasons. In the dry period, 6 months, all the leaves fall, temperatures rise, and there's no water. So all the plants and animals have to adapt, and that's what allows them to continue to live there. So I wanted to study this cat for conservation. At the end of the study, in October of 2015, there was a hurricane at the same site. It was Patricia Hurricane, Category 5. And at the time, it was the biggest hurricane ever recorded in the Western Hemisphere until last year, of course. That changed. Many people think that not much happened because it it traveled between two cities, but the effects were devastating. It was as if somebody had cut all the tops of the trees. It really was devastating. So my project had to change. I could not study the ocelots like I wanted. So I wanted to assess the effect of the hurricane in the community of mammals. With the help of National Geographic, I used these trap cameras to assess how they move, their schedules, when they're active. And one thing that I saw was that ocelots are a species that in the short term seem very resistant to these events because of their natural traits, their diet, or the distance, the land that they need to survive. This allows them to adapt to these events. But others, like the jaguar and the puma, are not so fortunate. There's another case, the rabbit. There were no rabbits before in this area. It was unusual. Now there's a big population. Why? Well, maybe because there's more light, the grass begins to grow, so the rabbits have what to feed on. So I wanted to see how this community responds to these type of events. And then another thing I found is that their times of activity change. Maybe the time in which they're active is prolonged or shortened, and that, of course, changes the dynamics of the community. So hurricanes are, of course, a natural disaster, but in the last few years, they have become more intense, more frequent. So it is necessary to understand how ecosystems respond and how we can have tools to protect these systems. I would like to invite you to support and disseminate these type of projects that are looking for conciliation in the current crisis of well-being and nature. Thank you very much. Now we continue with the explorer, Andres Link. He is from Colombia. He's a biologist from the University of the Andes, the Andean University. Good morning. I want to tell you about two very contrasting worlds. The first one I want to show you is this pristine place. There's hardly any human footprint. The Amazon in Ecuador, and there are some human tribes that have never been contacted, that is true, but in the last 20 years, here I have been able to work with a very charismatic species, which are the spider monkeys. And one of the things we have studied as explorers of National Geographic is we want to understand their behavior, their social behavior. Why the individuals establish social links throughout their lives, and they maintain them, and they compete. But an interesting thing we found is that this species is remotely related to us as humans and to chimpanzees. Their behavior allows us to understand our own behavior. Males, for example, come together and they form patrols to go around the edges of their area, and they have helped us to understand the evolution of war and conflict. So this makes us think we're at a fascinating moment to be primatologists. Since Jane Goodall began her work 60 years to now, we have a lot to learn. But I also think it is a very sad moment to be a primatologist, because almost all the populations of primates in the planet are exposed to some kind of modification of their habitat. They're subject to pressure because of human activity. And it is in that sense that makes me think that as primatologists, if we want to continue to understand what these species give us, well, we've been working for 10 years in one of the ecosystems that has been most interrupted, but also with the greatest biodiversity in the planet in Colombia. The brown spider monkey, we want to see how fragmentation affects their behavior, their ecology. They live in isolated areas, and one of the things we've seen, such as a change in diet or change in behavior, well, we're doing that. Some phantoms in the woods were looking at us. It is this brown spider monkey. And if you see it closely, it's not brown at all. They're albino. And others close by are also albino, and they're beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful. And they're telling us something that is very sad, that probably they're albinos because these populations are becoming isolated and they have low genetic variability because they cannot crossbreed. So they are sending a very, very strong message. And they're saying, please do something for us. Please do something to rescue us. And this brought me to a phrase that I saw recently in Jalapa. One of the fathers of primatology, Milton de Mello, he said hundreds of years ago, life is very short for such a big love. And this makes me think that each one of us in the fields here, in our community work, when we plant trees, we can do something to save these species and guarantee future generations of these monkeys, my children, my grandchildren, that we can have the planet we want. Thank you very much. And we go on. Now we go on with Pedro Peloso. He is from Brazil. He's a biologist. I travel throughout the world trying to learn and document animal species that are in those places where I go, but I'm especially interested in documented species that are in danger of extinction or that are little known by scientists. Sometimes I'm extremely lucky because I find species that are not known and known. They're totally new, that I'm the first one to see them. I had that luck 20 times. I was fortunate enough to see that. Why should National Geographic Society and NOFAX give me money to go to the middle of the Amazons to look for frogs and snakes? Well, for example, the frogs, some have a chemical compound in their skin that can be used as medicine, but we hardly know anything. We don't know all the frogs. We don't know about all their composition. I have a special passion for frogs. This is the frog that changed my profession or changed my life. This gigantic frog, I took the photograph 12 years ago when I was a biology student in Brazil. At the time, I did not realize the importance of the photographs, but in 2006, and many colleagues for another 10 years were looking for these species in other places, and we never found it. Today, it is only known from that site where I first found it, an area that is only 4 times larger than Central Park in New York. And this is why it is critically under threat of becoming extinct. And the same as that one, we have many other problems. Many species are very little known. 1 out of every 3 amphibians in the world are under threat of extinction to some degree. 1 out of every 4 species, we don't even have enough information about their biology, and we cannot know how threatened they are. So what I'm trying to tell you is that we have to invest in that and go out and seek those things that are there. I have discovered 20 species, and I have many other colleagues that have discovered others. You take a picture in a park, you don't know what it is, put it on Instagram. It's a frog or Pedro Peloso, and I'm going to look at your picture. It's interesting, no, to do these kind of investigations. So I want to leave you with this photograph from 2007, another species that does not have a name yet, and I discovered it last year. Thank you. And now, to close this segment, we have Rodrigo Medellin, who is from Mexican, laureate from Rolex, researcher from the Institute of Ecology, from UNAM, and sometimes he sells tequila. Good morning, or good afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. I am so pleased to be here. I want to tell you that bats are probably the most unfairly mistreated animals in the world. There are many other animal species, spiders, sharks, that have a bad reputation, but nobody gives us more benefits every day of our lives than bats. And let me show you about these 3 main benefits that bats give us. First, to the right, you can see a bat feeding from a moth that is so important in the beans and the rice. These are the same pests, and only in the border area of Mexico and the United States, there are approximately 20 to 30 million of these bats. The guanero bat, it's one single species, and every million of these bats destroys 10 tons of insects every night. Tell that to President Trump, please. So we know that if we were to lose these bats, our harvests, our crops would disappear. The second benefit is shown in the bat on the left-hand side of the slide. It is it disseminates seeds. And we know, because of the studies we've done for decades, that these bats are the ones that most quickly promote the recovery of wet tropical forests in all of Latin America. And if this morning you ate a a guava or a fig or part of a sapote, well, there is another link with bats because they are the ones that disseminate those seeds. And finally, we have this bat. He is the star of the show. He is responsible for the pollination of agave. And that is how we have tequila. So, such an emblem of our national identity. So thank the bat when you drink your tequila. I also want to tell you that I'm one of the most happy persons you know. I have devoted my entire life since I was 11, 12 years old to study, learn about bats, and to defend them. And that work has led me to ensure that my entire research has a connection, a link to improving public policies. I am working with the federal government. I'm their advisor for biodiversity issues, and I represent Mexico in some international conventions. For example, the Convention for Species Under Threat of Extinction. I cannot ask more of life. I want to thank my entire team because everything that I do is truly the result of this fabulous group of people. They're all a bit nuts, but I do believe the world begins to those who are kind of nutty and crazy. Thank you. I am lucky and happy. No, crazy and happy. Sorry. Okay, we are done with the first segment of our program. We're going to take a 10-minute break. And then when we come back, we will listen to Gael, Jonathan Bailey, and other explorers who are working in our changing planet and human journey. So, a 10-minute break, please. Thank you.
Early childhood. But the work has not yet ended. This is just the beginning.
Our ecosystem was under threat, and so I decided then I'm going to do something about it.
The challenge is to be yourself. Forget about what others tell you and just go do it. Women in our society face limitations in education. My goal is to change that.
Fear of taking risks, fear of failure. That's the biggest thing that stops girls from getting into this field.
There were some who tried to discredit my observations because I was a young, untrained girl.
I get to decide what I can and cannot do. We're pushing the boundaries for future generations.
For us to be down there together as three strong women achieving what we set out to do, it's not something I'll soon forget.
It's important to recognize the women that have paved the way for us today.
When students see people that look like them, it gives them that motivation that they need in order to say, you know what, I can go ahead and do this too.
When you educate a girl, you educate the world.
We cannot get to the best possible exploration if we don't have the totality of people in the room to contribute to the conversation.
Favor de darle la bienvenida al científico en jefe y vicepresidente senior para la ciencia y la exploración, Dr. Jonathan Bailey.
Buenos dias. Thank you for having us to Mexico, and it's a great honor to be part of the first Explorers Festival in Latin America. Now, when I got off the plane last night, I was whisked off to dinner, and Gary had each of the explorers stand up and talk about their work. And whether they were a storyteller or a scientist or an educator or a technologist, It was unbelievably inspirational. And I sat there just thinking about how lucky I am. And I just want to thank all of you that I have the opportunity to work with you. Now, this presentation here is on the strategy for science and exploration. I'm also going to talk about how it weaves into our educational strategy. But to sum it all up, it's really about supporting the people that were speaking last night. It's about ensuring that that community can have maximum impact. It's about empowering people to influence others, to inspire others, and to address some of the greatest challenges of the 21st century. Now, when you think about National Geographic, it's an institution that's really opened our eyes to the world. It's helped connect people, and it's helped connect people to the natural world. But the world has changed dramatically since National Geographic started. So when National Geographic first started, there was about 1.5 billion people on the planet. There's now over 7 billion people on the planet, and if we go up towards 2050, we're looking at almost 10 billion people on the planet. So currently, we're using about 1.5 times the amount of resources that the Earth can generate naturally. And by 2050, we'll be using almost 3 times the amount of resources that the Earth can generate naturally. And this is clearly unsustainable. And what we obviously want is a planet in balance. We want a planet that can provide for people, but also for other forms of life. And although this is going to be extremely challenging, we believe at National Geographic that this is possible. But there is going to be a difficult bottleneck. There are going to be amazing challenges. And every organization has to think about the unique contributions that they can make to help us get through this challenging era. Now, National Geographic believes there are 3 areas that we can make a really unique contribution. The first is helping people understand the importance of the diversity of life, helping us redefine our relationship with the natural world. And we do this by furthering knowledge and getting that knowledge into the classrooms when people are forming their ideas about society and the natural world, and having them care more about other species and ecosystems. The second area is driving innovation, and that's really working with the global network of explorers and empowering you and the rest of the individuals like you around the world to really help us lower the ecological or the human footprint so that we can make it through this tight period over the next 50 years. And the third is to secure the components of the natural world that are essential for all life. This is really securing the heart and the lungs of the planet. So how do we do this? Well, most organizations think, well, how can we assemble a team that's going to solve all the world's problems? And that's exactly not what we do. We reach out to the best and the brightest, the most inspiring and passionate individuals around the world that want to make a change. We're looking for storytellers, we're looking for scientists, we're looking for educators, conservationists, we're looking for technologists. And I start with exploration because we're a science-based organization. Everything we do is based on knowledge, and we have to think about what are the areas of knowledge that we want to drive forward. Well, we want to understand who we are. We want to demonstrate that we're actually all quite closely related. We also want to understand some of our shortcomings, and in that maybe we'll be better at governing the planet together. We want to look at some past cultures, and we want to help learn from those cultures and hopefully have them illuminate some ways in which we can have a more sustainable future. We want to break down barriers in terms of culture or race or ethnicity. It's going to be extremely challenging over the next 50 years, and we have to break down those barriers if we're going to work together. We need to respect and understand other forms of life. So we want to invest in understanding the 10 million other species with which we share the planet. We also need to understand how the planet works, and that fundamentally we're actually dependent on the working of the planet for our very existence. And then we have to think about the status of the planet. We have all these indices. We have social, political, economic indices in real time, but we don't have indices that measure the status of the planet, the very vital sign, essentially the indicator of all indicators. We want to know what's happening to species. We want to know what's happening to ecosystems. But equally, we want to know what's happening to cultures. We want to know what's happening to language. And then we can see if we're intervening, if we're actually having an impact or not, and the impact that humanity is having on the global community. But ultimately, we have to focus on communicating, and this is probably the thing that the science conservation community has been the poorest at, and it's an area that we can have the greatest contribution. That's helping really make the case for culture and for biological diversity. Now, when we have all this information and we help drive it forward with individuals like you, we want to take that information and then bring it into the schoolroom. And we want to make these digital assets available so that teachers can use this as material to help the next generation understand, to understand other forms of life, to understand our dependence on other species and ecosystems. We don't want them just to understand, we want them to get out and get involved. We want them to be using tools like citizen science to explore and get dirty, and to be inspired by explorers like you to realize that they can have an impact on the planet. We want to go from knowledge to action. And I'm just going to show a short video which shows a program we've developed in our educational work called GeoInquiry, and it does just that.
From GeoInquiry, we learned about ourselves.
GeoInquiry taught us how to act.
I liked GeoInquiry because it helped me visualize and see that we're all connected to the Earth.
My name is Cherie Barton. I teach 4th graders at Madison Middle School in Rexburg, Idaho, and this is our National Geographic GeoInquiry project.
They started studying about the Pacific Ocean and found out about the gyres and the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Wow, they wanted to know more right after that.
After a lot of collaboration, our class decided to ask, how can we better educate our community about the dilemma plastic creates in the ocean? How can we help the city of Rexburg reduce, reuse, and recycle plastic bags?
We researched how to take action, protect sea creatures, and find ways to stop the use of non-reusable bags.
Our teams created presentations for the 3 largest stores in town.
Each of the 3 stores we visited committed to making changes.
One of my favorite parts was in the create phase when we made reusable bags out of t-shirts.
Idaho has a law that prevents local governments from making any legislation about plastic bags. Instead of thinking this is a dead end, they decided to call our local senator, have him come into class, talk about how laws were made, and what do you do when you don't agree with the law.
Our class wrote a letter to the legislators to ask them to be more aware of the ways Idahoans can help reduce the use of plastic bags.
They are drafting a bill to repeal House Bill 372.
One of the students came to me and said, Mrs. Barton, I feel important. We know how to change the world now. After teaching school for 29 years, I can honestly say I don't think I've ever had a project that pulls students together as well, crosses curriculum, and keeps student engagement the way GeoInquiry does.
Even though we are only 4th graders, we are making a difference.
We love GeoInquiry!
Pretty amazing. So what happens when we have these amazing global citizens and they get a little bit older? Well, we empower them. And that's you, the Explorer community. And we have this great global network where we're looking for the brightest, the best minds to address some of the greatest challenges of the 21st century. Now, we have to think about how we can really empower this community. We give out grants and we give out fellowships. We want to be there for people when they're thinking about their first job, when they're really breaking into the field, when they're interested in culture or the natural world, and we want to give you your early career grant. Then we want to be there for you when you have your bold idea, when you have that creative idea that's going to help change the world, your Explorers grant. And then we have our larger calls for proposals, which are in line with our programmatic work. So it might be something like, how do we make the case for the natural world? We also want to think more than just giving grants. We want to think about how we can train and how we can help to build networks to train each other. A number of you have just been through Storytelling Bootcamp, and we want to do more online learning as well so that we can take this to scale. We also want to create a voice. We want people who are saving the planet and who are championing cultural diversity to be just as or more important than our movie stars or our athletes. We want to provide platforms. We want to provide a voice. We want to have a magazine and then a book and then a massive symposium. We want all sorts of opportunities for you as a community to be heard. And then we want to provide you with the tools, the techniques, the technology to be successful. But not only that, we want to drive forward the technology needed to scale up the conservation movement as a whole. So how do we really push forward monitoring? How do we push forward surveillance? How do we push forward public engagement? And then we have our big bets, really. These are the programs that we invest more in. And I'm not going to cover them all. I'll just cover a few of them. But we have Joel Sartori, who's out photographing species in captivity all over the world. He's creating an ark. He's photographed 7,500 species. And he's not just making a catalog, he's helping us think differently about the diversity of life. He's taking us beyond your lions, your tigers, and your elephants. And then we're linking this up with PhotoArk Edge Fellows around the world. And this group has just finished their training. And here they're developing blueprints for survivals for some of the weirdest and most wonderful species that most people have never heard of, such as the volcano rabbit. And then we really want to lean into particular species. And we want to use our unique strengths in terms of convening and our partnership with partners to amplify the message of the importance of these species and to raise money for them. This is the Sumatran rhino. There's about 30 of them left in the wild. It represents about 20 million years of independent evolutionary history and is about to be lost, much like the vaquita. We can help highlight these species, we can help amplify the message, and we can help raise funds to make sure that they can be enjoyed by future generations. And then we want to think about how we can secure the heart and lungs of the planet. And we've set a target over the next 10 years of at least 10 million kilometers squared. And just to put that in perspective, it's about the size of Canada. Now, you may say that that's a lot, and perhaps that's almost impossible, but we have our Pristine Seas program. And Pristine Seas is aiming to set or to create 20 protected areas by 2020. And I believe that they're going to succeed that or exceed that. And they've already created 5 million kilometers squared, and that's half the size of Canada. So extremely impressive. But we have to think about what they're doing in the ocean and how we can replicate that on land. We have a big project in the Okavango Delta, which is aiming to secure the entire watershed. And if announced as a protected area, it'll be probably the largest protected area in sub-Saharan Africa. But that's not enough. We have to think about the last wild places. And so we've looked at the entire globe, and we've mapped out the areas of low human impact, or where we still have wilderness. And any area you can see in color here is an area that is still intact. And then we're trying to figure out who the amazing landscape-scale conservationists are that are working in these landscapes, and how we can work with them to really push forward the science, the exploration, the storytelling, and the resources they need to bring their activities to scale and effectively protect these areas. We were recently in London, and we launched an initiative with African Parks, with the Vice Foundation, and with the government of Benin for $23.5 billion to secure Pinjari. This is the most important intact habitat in West Africa. This move alone will help protect the West African lion, the West African cheetah, and probably the elephants of West Africa. So, success. How do we define success? Well, it's not going to be easy, but it's entirely possible that we can drive forward science, that we can bring this science into the classroom, that we can change values, that we can truly innovate using the global community of you and people like you all around the world. And if we achieve those two things, then it will be entirely possible to save the heart and the lungs of the planet, which are essential for all life. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce Gael Almeida from the Society's International team based here in Mexico City. She is the Senior Program Director for our Latin American program. Thank you. Gael.
Ella es Gael Almeida. Well, thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. I have the most wonderful job in the world because I work with this wonderful group and groups of Latin American explorers that are not only exploring, but they are making changes, they are innovating, they are doing such an amazing amount of things that are actually generating change in the world. And that for us is the most important thing to support and at the same time to disseminate via the communication platforms that we have. I am part of the society group, but I am the liaison with National Geographic partners, among other things. So I know many of you, and I am going to present the last two segments. So we'll go to Human Journey, and here you will hear archaeologists, educators, and photographers that are exploring. And I think that this is an iconic segment because it was via archaeology that we started supporting exploration projects in Latin America several years ago. So first, we'll start with Ricardo Azarcoya. Ricardo Azarcoya is Mexican and he is photographer. He is an ambassador of Canon Mexicana. Documentary photography can change, waste time or expand time. But now I want to go back in time. I remember when I was a little boy, one of my most wonderful times was the storytelling of my parents, and I love that. And I still remember when they told me all these wonderful stories, and I picture all of that in my head. And I think that they are like snapshots. But the most wonderful part of my childhood was when once a month there was a magazine with a yellow frame, and I sat with my dad and taking a look at the photographs. I don't remember if I was on my own or he explained the photographs to me, but I could sit there for hours. Stories of people is my passion. Why did the woman who is a police woman wants to be like that? Why homeless people are in such point in life? And my tool to tell this story is photography. Like Juan de Lacandon. Juan is one of the last Lacandon in the Chapaneca jungle who eats and drinks from the jungle, who adores his gods and talks to his gods. And he taught me that all living things are together, that we are all connected, that the roots of the trees are the roots of the stars, and that every time a tree falls, a star is extinguished. He has 11 children and 3 wives. And in the past years, 2 of his children died due to respiratory diseases. And perhaps he would have had medical attention if he lived in the city. But this is the true power of documentary photography, of this storytelling. This is the true power of National Geographic Explorers. It is to take people to a world unknown to them and therefore start change. Help me. Help me to generate more accesses, to tell more stories in Latin America, and let's help each other to preserve the tradition that started in 1880. That is to inspire people to protect the planet. Thank you.
Maritza Morales is Mexican, and she was also awarded by Rolex. She's an environmental educator who at 10 years old founded and is now director of HUNAB. Good afternoon. I agree with all of you when you say that explorers are the basis for recovering that harmonious balance of our planet Earth. And that is why in the last 23 years I have been struggling to make sure that explorers will never become a species under threat of extinction. And in Yucatan, we do it through environmental education at an excellent level. This is how we can protect our grandmother, the earth. Look at this image. Through games, we give a high-performance training to boys and girls so that they will become environmental instructors. We empower them as social entrepreneurs, and we do it at the only center worldwide of excellence in education, the Park Hunab Ceiba Pentandra. That's the scientific name of the ceiba, which is the sacred tree of the Mayas. The children, through games, learn about the illegal trade of species, planting, climate change, and this strategy has enabled us to reach more than 5,000 children every year. And we only have 45% of our facilities have been built. Imagine if we were able to get more support in order to finish the building of more facilities, we would be able to reach more than 64,000 children a year. Imagine what that would signify in the lives of these children and that of their families. Because not only are we supporting environmental knowledge, but also the development of early life projects. We finance them. We are the only ones in the world that provide this financing to children. We are planting in their hearts the knowledge, the values, the strength to protect the nature that will be with them throughout their entire lives. And there's another piece in Ceiba Pentandra, the Children's Environmental Journal, HUNAB. And thanks to a grant from the National Geographic, every month it reaches more than 5,000 boys and girls in Yucatan, including the Mayan communities, so that they can learn about Grandmother Earth. We are convinced that our society, if we do not know how to read and write, at least we can still go ahead. But if we do not know about the environment, we have no probability of being able to survive. I invite you to build solid pillars, solid roots for the survival of our Grandmother Earth. But we have to work together. Entrepreneurs, businessmen, policymakers, the media, please help us to consolidate Ceiba Pentandra, not only in Yucatan, but in many other parts of Mexico and the world. And I can assure you that through this means we will have more generations of explorers who will protect and discover more hidden corners of our Grandmother Earth. We would like to welcome Gabriel Petro. He is from Peru. He's an archaeologist from the National University of Trujillo in Peru. Hello, Mexico. How are you? I want to ask a question. How many of you, as children, wanted to be archaeologists? Please raise your hand. Many of you, right? All of us as children we dreamt about finding hidden cities like Machu Picchu or going to the bottom of the sea to find hidden treasures. I was very lucky because I live surrounded by archaeological sites, especially cemeteries. I still recall how frightened my parents were when they found human bones under my bed. Now it's my wife who gets scared. In 2011, thanks to a grant from National Geographic, we found this site where there are many human bodies. But the peculiarity here is that there were many children who died between 6 and 8 years old, and their state of preservation is quite good. And they were buried with many llamas, very, very tiny ones. But the most fascinating thing in our research is that we noted as we were excavating that these children had died because they had their breasts opened to extract the heart. What happened so that this culture, Chimu, the Chimu period, what happened that made them sacrifice so many children? Was it a political, environmental crises that led them to do this? What made the Aztecs and the Mayans in this same city at the Great Temple sacrifice children around the same time? What led to that? What was the reason? What has made humans sacrifice other humans throughout their history? These are some of the questions that, from the perspective of anthropology and archaeology, we are seeking to answer. But there are even more. A year and a half ago, we found another site with many, many children that had been sacrificed. They're in a perfect state of preservation, but I need your help because this site is going to be destroyed this year. And we need to act very, very quickly because I'm sure those mummies will provide the answer as to why these sacrifices were made, why they were made. As an archaeologist and National Geographic Explorer, I want to continue to dream as a child in order to bring the voice of these children to current times and tell the planet that story that we do not know yet about our Mesoamerican civilizations. Thank you, Gabriel. Now we're going to have Maria del Carmen Chavez. She is also from Peru. She's a biologist working with the ACER Foundation. Thank you. How do we inspire the new generation of conservation leaders? That is what impassions me. And my work with the ACER Foundation, and now proudly as a National Geographic Explorer. That's what I want to do. This began when I was a child, seeing photographs of the national park. When I saw them for the very first time, this was the Manu National Park. I wanted to go there. And after a few years, after having graduated from the university, studying biology, I finally found myself in this remote place of the Peruvian Amazon. At first, the first night, I was terrified, the immense dimension of the place, the noises. I felt so insignificant. But there was no alternative. The next boat that was going to be able to take me out would arrive in 3 months. So I went into the Cochacashu Biological Station together with many other young students like myself who wanted to study conservation. This place is so beautiful that I not only fell in love, but I decided it was going to do everything possible in my life to preserve it, to care for it, that I was going to be devoted to it. So years later, I named my child Manu, the same name as the park. What you see here is like a 14-year-old child drawing the forest where he lives. This is the wealth, the richness of this region in Peru. We call it the capital of our biodiversity. It is an immense place of wealth, not only biological, but also cultural. Unfortunately, as in many other similar places, there are many environmental pressures in the last 10 years because of the high cost in the value of gold. We are undergoing an unprecedented destruction. It is estimated that more than 30,000 illegal miners have migrated to this area, devastating huge areas, cutting the forest to find the gold under the earth, and also destroying the sediment of the rivers. And it's not only adults, there are children that are being exploited. Whole communities are being infected by the toxicity of the mercury. Last year, Pope Francis visited us in order to make the situation evident. What can we do in face of this? After 25 years of experience, organization, and now with the help of the National Geographic, ACER is laying out a platform that helps us to no longer be isolated. We cannot work alone. If we're united, it's much better. It's like a symbiosis. There has to be mutual help. So we brought together school children from grade school, secondary, and teachers, and we got them together with researchers And that is how we're trying to ensure a sustainable future for them by having this connection for them and for the world. Thank you. Thank you, Carmen. We're now going to hear Ana Cecilia Mauricio, who is also from Peru. She's an archaeologist from the Catholic University of Lima. Good afternoon. Child is El Niño is a climatic phenomena that affects the world. When we have the El Niño, large masses of hot water move in the Pacific Ocean towards the western coast of South America, bringing torrential rains, floodings, pests. Countries such as Peru are particularly affected by this phenomena of El Niño. It has always been something negative. It is synonymous of a catastrophe, of loss, of death. But El Niño was always something negative. Did it exist in the past? How did ancient populations react to it? So this is what I'm doing. An archaeologist of climate. I'm investigating how people in the past related to their environment and how they confronted climate change. I work in this area, the northern part of Peru. It is called Pampa de las Salinas in the valley of Chao. This area is a dry bay. It seems to have been frozen in time many, many years ago, and now currently it is totally dry. The soil is salty, there's no water, there's no population. But paradoxically, we have found more than 30 archaeological sites surrounding this dry bay. So the question is, why did they live here? So we made some geological and archaeological studies, and the results were amazing. This site that you see here is one of the ones I'm looking at now. It's called Los Morteros. We have discovered it's a monumental, the most ancient site in this region. It's probably one of the most ancient ones in the entire Peruvian coast. But not only that, here I am holding some adobe in my arms. This is a clay brick. It is probably the most ancient adobe of the Andes. It is a clay brick that people use, and they continue to use it. It is a 1,000-year-old tradition and seems to have all begun here at this site. But you may ask yourself, what does this have to do with El Niño? Well, we also found that about 6,000 years back, El Niño, its rainfall, helped create coastal wetlands, coastal bays that help these people remain in these areas. So if this is a dry bay, before it was like this. It had vegetation, water, and helped people to construct what they needed. But now, Pampas in the Chao Valley is a very important site, not only because of its archaeology. It's like a time capsule that holds important information regarding climate and phenomena such as El Niño. And this can help us understand what is happening today and what can we expect of these phenomena in the future and how people can react to them. So this site, Pampa de las Salinas, is a very, very important site. It is a treasure we should preserve and study. And I want you to help me disseminate the information about the Valley of Chao in the coast of Peru. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cecilia. And now to close this segment, the Human Journey segment, we're going to welcome Guillermo de Anda. He's Mexican. He's an underwater archaeologist, and he heads the project of the Great Aquifer in the Mayan area, the Great Mayan Aquifer. It is a pleasure to be here with you. I just want to clarify, neither Gael nor Rodrigo have the best job in the world. I have it. And I'm a very fortunate man. Why? Because I'm a Mexican, I'm an explorer, I'm of National Geographic, and I'm an archaeologist, and I can go to a different planet every day and come back for dinner. And I don't use any rare substance. So I visit this fantastic world, the dark world of the Mayas, in which I really feel like I'm in another planet. what we do in my work is we take photographs of these fantastic places. This makes this world look absolutely splendid. This picture was a cover of the National Geographic in August 2013. It is the only time that 3 Mexicans were included there, and this makes us very proud. We make expeditions in the oldest way that National Geographic used to do, but we also use modern tools, innovative technology. Our great friend Kory Yarkowski in this photograph with on the kayak, he is a genius of technological innovation, and we're using all kinds of apparatus to find enigmas about the Mayas. This is a mythical cenote that is under the pyramid, El Castillo, and we are looking everywhere, even in drainage, and we're going to go into all possible caves until we reach this place. It is full of mystery. We use tools, technology, but the most important part is the human part. As I told you, in these expeditions has led us to connect the longest flooded cave, 347 uninterrupted kilometers of flooded areas. This is a distance between Mexico City and Acapulco, and this is a whole massive labyrinth. It is a huge mass of scientific information, an invaluable resource, and finally, I think the last frontier of exploration after the oceans. And this is what sustains life. When we are going underwater, we have the Star Trek syndrome, travel to the stars. We are in places where men have never been, but we've been surprised. There were explorers before us, but they were not so fortunate. There were explorers about 10,000 years ago, but the reason for exploring was very different. They are seeking for water because they were undergoing a big climatic change that now sounds unfortunately very familiar. This is the paradox of the great Mayan aquifer, this large mass of water under the earth that sustains all the biodiversity, human life, the jungle, all in the Yucatan Peninsula. It is important to become aware of this and to realize that without this large mass of water, there is no peninsula. We are promoting right now with UNESCO to turn this great Mayan aquifer heritage of humanity. We're moving forward with this, but we need your help to go even further. Sí, necesitamos su ayuda. We need your help to go further. So please, National Geographic, I am very, very proud to be one of your explorers of this society. Before we change segments, I would like to ask you to give a large applause to all the explorers for their very impressive work. Now we're going to listen to the last segment, but not least important. They are all important. The last segment is called Changing Planet, and here we are going to hear from a group of explorers that are devoted to working in a planet that is constantly changing. So let us begin with Octavio Aburto, a marine biologist. He's Mexican. He works in the Oceanography Institute of Scripps. I have one objective. I want to bring together 1,000 scuba divers. Why? So they help me to protect the oceans. I am a professor of marine ecology, but for 25 years I have been scuba diving and taking underwater photography like this one. But all these years I have realized that even though this sector of scuba diving, it generates a very important economy, a lot of wealth, and yet it's not unified, and this could be very important for marine preservation. So I think we have to support governments, in this case the Mexican government, to fulfill the challenges they have. Mexico signed an agreement which says that for 2020 it has to protect 10% of its seas. Last year, with the Pristine Seas initiative, we inspired the Mexican government and we supported them so that they could decree the archipelago and preserve it, which corresponds to 5% of these. But there's still a lot to do. What's the idea? The plan is very simple, to use science plus communication. So, first of all, I and my team want to create the largest site of scuba divers in Mexico. In only 1 month, we have compiled 400 sites in this base, and we want to estimate how large an area we would protect. And finally, and probably most important, we want to publish the first Mexican scuba diving atlas that will then become a proposal to the government and lead them to protect these seas. And of course, this has to have the backup of all these scuba divers. We want to inspire this community so that they can come together and grow into a very important network. I want to have a road trip to seek out all these scuba divers' stories, invite artists, photographers, museum owners, so that they become part of this huge project. Let me tell you something. If this plan works, I think we're not only going to be able to protect many sites in Mexican oceans. I think this can be replicated in all of Latin America. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Octavio. Now let's welcome Erika Cuellar. She's from Bolivia. She has also been awarded by Rolex, and she is working with the Scientific and Technical Commission of her homeland. The Gran Chaco, this is one of the challenges of preservation. The Gran Chaco in South America. That means that these resources provided by this bioma are not only relevant for science. The true challenge is to understand that these resources are also relevant for the survival of people who live in the Gran Chaco. These people who have been struggling for so long to preserve their land. This is up to date. This is something current. These people who need these resources so badly to live, and not only to improve their life standard, but to live as they have done historically. These people do not only have needs in this area, they have not the knowledge, and above all, and something that I love, they have the connection with their environment, something that most of us have lost. As a biologist and conservationist and daughter of a Guarani woman from this indigenous group, I cannot ignore the presence of people in the areas where I work and for which I have been working so hard in terms of preservation. These people who are in this area that are not invisible. I was thinking, how can I truly combine my scientific training and the need of empowering of these people? They have so much to contribute, and they don't have this voice to speak up. Therefore, my strategy for quite some time has been to complement the knowledge of these people and the development of a training program. Among other things, this program included 800 hours of theoretical and practical. It is pretty much like a master's diploma. And these modules included biology, conservation, resource management, and some modules that have to do with first aid, for example, that are key in the areas where they live, and if they are well trained, they can save lives. So my strategy was to explore other other ways to do things, and not only to fight the system that were hiding the challenges. I believe in power. I am certain of the power of people. And this photograph of Alberto II, he's one of my colleagues, and I love showing this picture because in his face you can truly see how proud he is, not only of completing the diploma program after such hard work in order to achieve that diploma, because he barely knew how to read and write. But Alberto is very happy in this picture because his people, his organization was able to obtain the declaration of 3.4 hectares of the land and the best preserved tropical forest in the world. And so he's right for feeling so happy. I want to tell him that as conservationists, I believe that we should invest money and effort and involve these people because they are not invisible. They need to step forward. They need to stop being only labor. When you think about conservation, don't forget about the people because they are our wonderful allies and they are able to join us in the process. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now let's welcome Carolina Freitas. Carolina Freitas is Brazilian. He's an ecologist from the Federal University of Rio Grande do Norte in Brazil. The tirarcu is one of the largest fish in the world. This wonderful fish lives in the Amazonia. In English, is called the acapaima. And the acapaima is very important for the people who live there, for their culture, for their economy, for their food source, and also for nature. I could tell you that the acapaima is like the jaguar. In spite of its relevance, the acapaima eats fisheries. Therefore, this might be a good solution for the problem. However, the truth of the matter is that nothing has changed. The Amazonia is very hard to oversee. Therefore, this fish kept on disappearing until there was a collaboration initiative between the government and the local peoples. The fishery of this fish was allowed only for the communities that allowed it to be done in a sustainable way. Therefore, they started working with this work. They can only fish a certain amount of the total of the individuals, and the communities are responsible for guaranteeing that nobody's going to fish illegally in that area. Therefore, local peoples stopped being the enemies and became the guardians, the stewards. And what are the results? Well, the populations of Arapaima have grown in the past years. And therefore, this is very, very important from an ecological, economical, and cultural standpoint. Besides that, the management of these animals has given rise to greater gender equality because women can take part in the fishery effort and they can make money as well as men. This is something that is not very common in fisheries. And therefore, I conduct research in all these areas with the work with the acapaima, and therefore I want to show that it is possible to recover pretty much extinct species if we try to find the way and alternatives in order to bring them closer to the local peoples, to get them involved in the preservation effort. At the end of the day, these people will have direct influence on their natural resources. Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Carolina. Now, let's listen Paola Rodriguez. Paola Rodriguez is from Mexico. He's an oceanographist from the University of Guadalajara. Well, good morning, everybody. Today, I want to ask you a question of multiple confusion. What are the corals? Are corals animals? Are corals plants? Or are corals rocks? Animals, I heard. Well, to my surprise, and we have 3 to 1. Yeah, they are animals, but they live in a close and pretty much perfect relationship with a microscopic algae that is pretty much like a plant. And this perfect relationship, aside from contributing with the coloring of coral reefs, contribute with the energy necessary for the skeletons that are similar to rocks. A set of these animals make up beautiful ecosystems and heterogeneous ecosystems like the one you see, and they are the home to a number of organisms. However, in spite of their relevance, we have lost approximately 50% of these ecosystems worldwide, and the rest are vulnerable. But what would happen if we lost these ecosystems, aside from my sadness? Well, we would lose fisheries. Fisheries depend upon the effect of the coral reefs. Likewise, we would lose beaches and the effects of mitigating the impact of hurricanes and storms, therefore mitigating natural resource disasters, as well as to contribute to sustainable economy. They are now contributing with millions of dollars to the economy of some communities. Therefore, we have to contribute in one way or another to prevent the loss of coral reefs. And that is where National Geographic helped us to create a restoration project called Fragments of Opportunity. It is called Fragments of Opportunity because we found areas where colonies have been fragmented naturally, and so we took healthy portions, fragments, and we give them a second chance elsewhere. We conduct yearly surveillance, and they are growing healthy. We have planted more than 2,000 fragments with 97% success. However, we have limitations, and that is where we need your help. We need your help to disseminate the relevance of these ecosystems and invite everybody to know them, to enjoy them, to help them be protected, and therefore to preserve them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, Osbel Hinojosa. Osbel Hinojosa is Mexican. He's a conservationist. He works in Pronatura Noreste. Well, good afternoon. I am very happy to join you, all of you. This is how a river should look, very much alive. However, this is the Colorado River in Baja California, in the borderline between Mexico and the U.S., the same one that is emerged in the Rockies and formed the Great Canyon. And that is because it is like this, because its water has been used for a number of purposes, and it supplies more than 40 million people, all the way from Denver, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Los Angeles, Mexicali, Tijuana, and Ensenada. And the river doesn't get all the way to the Gulf of California for 50 years already. This is the Yuma clapper rail, and it is endemic of the region, and it is endangered due to the absence of water. Therefore, for the past 20 years, I have been working with colleagues in Mexico and in the U.S. to restore the line of the river, and we have done that through science and community work and preservation as well of different sites. And it is working. This is the river with water in Baja California, and this has been possible thanks to a coalition called Raise the River, made up by organizations in Mexico and the U.S. And we have been working with farmers in the Valley of Mexicali in order to bring about, again, all these water use licenses. This has been also possible thanks to the collaboration between Mexico and the United States. This is an agreement called Act 323, guaranteeing water for the restoration of the Delta for the next years, aside from $9 million for the restoration and for science as well. And there has been wonderful benefits for nature. Birds are coming back, and obviously benefits for people, such as Isabella that you see here, that who for the first time could see the river with water and enjoy it. However, we are barely beginning. Therefore, we need your help. We need your help in order to disseminate, in order to know more via the social media. Thank you very much. Thank you, Osvel. Now we have Diego Ponce de Leon. He's founder, he's Mexican, and he's founder of Three Stone Analytics. He's an entrepreneur. Well, the environment justice work deals with contamination infrastructure and environmental damage on marginated groups derived from a number of purposes: gender, race, or economic activity. This photograph was taken close to one of the surfing areas in South America. The area around the tourist area have to deal day in, day out with environmental damage. This topic is very important for Latin America because this is the most dangerous area of the world for researchers that work with environmental justice. There is not enough data and transparency for conducting follow-up. Therefore, we are creating the first environmental justice platform in Mexico. We are digitalizing information data such as refinery, dams, oil ducts, electric power plants, together with social data, indigenous territories, and we also use high-resolution information in order to give rise to algorithms and detect the presence of mines in Mexico and open-air dumpsters. And we have online text and photograph information for anonymous filing of information in order to contribute to transparency and in order to give rise to positive solutions. With National Geographic 2 years ago, we implemented the first intelligent network inclusive network project in Latin America. Wind farms can give rise to social problems. However, we work with middle income and low income communities, and they help us to introduce this energy using wireless and controls, therefore reducing their electric power bill, and received money in exchange of the wind farm. We now have all the tools, we have the technology, we have the knowledge in order to give rise to a more fair world for everybody. We just need to imagine and take action. If you wish to talk about the project with me, my colleagues and myself would be delighted to work with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Diego. We're now going to close this segment of Changing Planet and give the floor to Andres Russo. He is Peruvian, he's from Nicaragua also, and he is a geoscientist, and he is the founder and director of the Boiling River Project. When I was a child in Lima, my grandfather told me a story, a legend, that truly would mark and change my entire life. It was a Paititi legend, El Dorado, the lost city in the Amazon, totally made of gold. And in that legend, there was one detail, a river that was boiling. Years went by, and I almost forgot about it. To tell you the truth, I was starting my PhD in geophysics, and I wanted to find out if this legend could truly be something real. And for years, I would ask geologists, experts, professors, if there truly could be such a thermal river in the Peruvian Amazon. And they all said no. Boiling rivers, large thermal rivers exist in the world, but they're in volcanic areas, and the Peruvian Amazon area is not volcanic. But I did not want to give up. It was a good story. It was a legend. And there, from an unexpected source, one detail stood out that let me get on a plane for 1 year, then through a dirt road for 2 hours, then with a small canoe going into the jungle. And sincerely, let me tell you, I was hoping to find something great, because Latin Americans do not exaggerate, right? I thought it was going to be something really huge. But what I saw was this. More than 700 kilometers from the nearest volcanic center, flowing for more than 6 kilometers, and it was 25 meters wide and 5 meters deep. There was a river, and it showed temperatures that, in some parts, was so hot that those waters that cause third-degree burns in less than a second, and they can even kill you. So this river, the Shanay Timpishka, boiled because of the heat of the sun, is a sacred site. And for me, it has redefined what that word means. It is a dream of a place. In the last few years, I have been devoted to understanding this magnificent site that had never been studied before. In 2011, I became this first geoscientist to receive the shamanic blessing that allowed me to study this river. But then the dream has become a nightmare, because year after year, I realized this jungle that I love so much, this rainforest, was disappearing. In Peru, we are losing Amazon rainforest of approximately half a football field every minute. It is a huge challenge. We are losing what is sacred, and together with the shamans, the local collaborators, international experts, we have founded an NGO to understand this place, to preserve it, to protect it. In the coming months, we're going to give our report to the National Geographic so we can develop new methodologies as to how we're going to protect this site. I cannot tell you much more right now, because conservation in Latin America can be very dangerous. We've had to connect with hunters, with corrupt politicians, with mafias, and they have threatened me, even with a rifle. The market, the informal, illegal market in that area is very, very active. I have had to infiltrate there to understand what are those things that are pushing forth all these markets. And you can read a little bit in the last edition, the December edition of National Geographic. What more can I tell you? That the next few steps have to go further. We're bringing together modern technology. That is the boiling sound. This is a direct connection I have with a jungle. It's a monitoring station, the first of many we're going to set up with drones, robots, with human effort. It will be Peruvian, but international also. And we're going to see how we can protect it so that it will not disappear and be able to go further, way beyond. Thank you so, so much.
Por favor, demos la bienvenida al
Let us
vicepresidente
welcome the
ejecutivo de
Executive Vice
National
President
Geographic
of
Partners
National
en
Geographic
América
Partners
Latina,
in Latin
Diego
America,
Reck.
Diego Reck. Thank you. It's over. It went by so quickly. I'm so sorry. I wanted to hear more, and I think you all feel the same. I'm going to start with a huge thank you to all of you who presented today. Thank you, Gary. Thanks to the entire board, the National Geographic Society. Thank you to National Geographic and its founders. I was asked to close the symposium. It's a great honor to do so, and asked me to write something previously, and I said no. First I want to feel and then speak from my heart. So thanks again for having inspired me. I am Diego. I'm an explorer, and just like all of you, I hope as of today you will feel that you are explorers today and for always, because as explorers we have a very specific mission to take the National Geographic Society mission, to take it forward and be able to tell these stories and be able to go through every screen of every media and take it to the people. Ricky said that we're all connected. And my mission, with my gratitude to be able to participate in this part of this business, is to connect National Geographic Society with partners, because we are all connected. There's no difference between the two, and this is the culture we want to create starting now. But of course, you cannot tell stories as in films or in entertaining series without the protagonists. We always need to have a good story, but also a good character, and those characters are each one of you, those explorers. We saw you there with Carlos, and we feel you are superheroes. In fact, there was a Batman, Matachica, Aquaman, Sexman, Spider-Man, and so many others. We have to find the way to compete or to find a place to be heard without so many sports or in so many screens. How can we do that? We're all interested in doing that. I am certain we will find a way to do it. Andres, we have Guillermo, Andres Russo, Octavio, who participate in the mysteries of the infraworld, and that was the show last year that was most seen, that had the biggest audience, and it allowed us to generate income so we can continue to cultivate, to push forth this machine, fostering projects, and continuing to be explorers. Andres Link, I wrote down, he said, life is too brief for such a big love. And I do believe the time of people today, a world that goes so fast with so much information, is very, very brief, very short. So we have to see how every day, just like you are building your project with so much passion, every single day we have to communicate. We cannot let one day go without communicating what you are doing. And this is why stories begin in the digital field, and then they end up on TV and the film and large events. So let us dream together of how we can reach more and more people. And finally, I wrote down what Medellin said. He said, the world belongs to those who are nuts or crazy. And someone else said she believes in the power of people. I do too. So I invite you all to go beyond, to go much further. Thank you so much. We still have a long week ahead of us. There's a lot to share, a lot to learn. I ask you all to please stay for lunch so we can continue to speak among ourselves and create some more things. Thank you.